I think that this festival, out of all of the local southeastern festivals, and even sort of in the U.S. across the board, does one of the better jobs of representing drum and bass. It's hard to find. There's a couple local Atlanta people who do drum and bass, like Torch and a few others, but I'm curious what the drum and bass scene looks like around the world, because it's obviously very strong in England, and then it sort of has little pockets. But from what you've seen, where do you see a drum and bass culture globally?
Well, it's really strong in Europe, kind of everywhere. There's like in every country, there's quite a big scene. I mean, not as big as techno but for instance, in our hometown, we throw a party. We've been throwing a party for 15 years, and right now, like, we keep selling out a venue that holds 2,000 people. So that's a big difference from having a stage or for instance, like, this summer we played a lot of festivals, and then sometimes your crowd is 3,000, but I also play for 30,000 people, so it's quite a big difference, But I like that. So I guess America, compared to Europe, it's quite small, but
sure.
And I think it has to do with your hip hop culture and your drinking age. Like when I was young, it's because when I was young, I could go out when I was 15, go to a club and get a beer, even though it might have been illegal. But drinking age was 16 for us, so you kind of those 5 years that here you're kind of not allowed. Those years when you're young, you want to experience all these things. That's the age where we're allowed to go out, and I think that everybody's really used to going out clubbing when they're young, and I think the culture.
Do you think that, obviously if you're going out when you're 15 and 16, you have, first of all, you have the energy to dance to 3 hours of drum and bass, which even people in their mid-20s maybe don't have the physical energy to skank to drum and bass for 3 hours. I see the drum and bass movement as it's happening in little pockets in the United States, competing and coinciding against it piggybacks on the techno rise, but it's also sort of going against the hardstyle movement that's happening. Hardstyle in Europe, all we see are videos of the festival stages, but it seems like that scene, the drum and bass, the hardstyle, and the hard dubstep scene in the Netherlands, England, and a little bit in Germany just seems like the most intense festival culture. Is it really?
Oh, yeah,
just as far as stage production and what we see of the shows.
It's good, yeah. The hardcore ones are really good. But, I mean, the biggest, like Tomorrowland or stuff, those productions are crazy, and that's kind of the same DJs you have here, the Martin Garrix or the Dead Mouse. The biggest difference is probably how big dubstep is in America compared to Europe. Like here it is kind of mainstream, right? And in Europe it's not, which is really interesting to see. And I think it has to do, like I said, also with your hip hop culture.
Like what's trap like over in Europe? Probably not nearly as big as here. Not so big,
no. Yeah. But I think that's your urban, your big hip hop culture. It has more space between the beats. It has a lot more swag than techno or whatever, It's like, it kind of fits with the rest of your music history, I guess.
Maybe so.
Jazz influence.
Yeah, but just, just jazz, hip-hop, blues, but, like hip hop culture in Holland is getting bigger and bigger, but it's fairly new compared to...
the history of American music is driven by essentially African American music.
Yeah.
Whereas the history of European music is driven by many, many other influences.
Yeah.
At least sort of in the pop cultural stream.
Yeah, true.
So, coming from the European mindset, and especially the Dutch mindset, I think that all of us here in the United States are very jealous of the logic that seems to be applied to the drug scene, and how well the Dutch seem to do a job of, while not condoning or encouraging, taking care of and understanding that young people like to party. If in the United States, obviously we have a lot of legal restrictions, but like what are some things that you see done right with regards to keeping kids safe and healthy and educated that I feel like maybe we're not doing here in the States?
Ooh, hard question. Well, it's changed. Like I said, it changed. Our alcohol rule changed from 16 to 18 now, and with that.
And do you think that was a bad thing?
Yeah, for me, I think so. Because with that change, you notice that the kids that they want to do something, and they're not allowed to drink, and then they might be allowed to get in and get like soda.
Right.
But then they start using drugs because they want to kind of experience something. So, like when I was young, it wasn't really, some people use something, but it was people would have a beer or smoke some weed or something. But now everybody's like using ecstasy. All the young kids around and I'm like, whoa, that's a big change in how a party is as well. Like everybody's like, So I think it really has to do with people will always try to experiment somehow, and if you kind of ban it, it will only make it more interesting. And then, if they can't drink, they'll take a pill and then go in and drink water, and nobody notices. And I think if you kind of, if you start with you can have a beer when you're young, and then you slowly build up that pace, people kind of realize, or they don't start with the hard drugs, but they slowly build and then find for themselves like this is enough for me. Or
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I was able to, drink a beer around my parents as a teenager, and I think that it definitely saved me. Like I didn't go crazy once I had access to club culture. I kind of slow bloomer, pace myself. I think you're right that
I'm the same. Like I never used any drugs. Like I just drink beer, basically, and that's it. And I don't really need, I don't have the feeling that I want to experiment or, So for me, that is also, I see all these kids doing things, and I can relate that they want to experience something. But maybe because I was raised differently, that's why I didn't really want to do it. I don't know. But I mean, in Holland, weed was kind of legalized, and I don't know, the drinking was younger, so it's like these kind of, it's not innocent drugs. I wouldn't say it's innocent, but if there's a ban on everything, they might just start and go for crack instead of having a Bud Light.
The other thing that gets affected by it is that when these things are so controlled, then a lot of things get sold as something when it's really not, and there's no control. Whereas if you go by Tylenol, it's Tylenol every time because it's legal and it's safe and it's prepared in a lab, and it's Tylenol. And when you don't have the same kind of allowances, you don't have the same kind of control over other stuff.
But for me, it's a hard question to answer because I grew up in quite a liberal country where compared to everyone around.
Well, that was sort of why I asked the question, is because the United States is in some ways the most profoundly liberal culture in the sense that it has essentially an atheist document of organization in the Constitution. It has enormous sort of constantly talked about levels of freedom culturally in many ways, but then it seems in some ways with regards to sort of behaviors that people view as moralized behaviors or immoral behavior, we can be extremely backwards in our thinking. And it's because the country was founded by a bunch of, buckle-wearing Puritans they were so conservative religiously that they had to escape Europe.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, maybe. Sense. I mean, I don't know. Do I have it here, like drug test labs and festivals? Like you can.
No, you're not allowed to pill test.
No.
In fact, the Dance Safe tent is right next to ours, and they are there with. They'll have like the printout with all the pH testing information, but they're not actually allowed to test or sell test kits. You can only buy them online. They can't physically sell you a test kit because the assumption is that that's
I understand. Yeah,
encouraging.
Yeah.
So it's sad. It's silly, but it is what it is. My only last question is, if someone was going to visit Holland, what should they absolutely see that's not in the brochure? An American who wants to experience Dutch culture.
Dutch culture. Well, I'm from a city called Utrecht. It's right in the middle.
Okay.
And everybody always goes to Amsterdam.
Right.
but our city is kind of has the same as the canals. It's really old, you know. It's a university city, so there's a lot of young people. But there's not a lot of tourists, so, and I think actually National Geographic kind of put it in the top 5 of best city, like unknown cities within Europe. So Utrecht is a good tip. And if you like our islands are really beautiful because they have really wide sand beaches. Our weather is not always great, but even though if it rains and it's stormy, it's still beautiful. So the top islands are great. And that city. That's probably my 2 favorite spots.
What's like a Dutch food secret?
It's pretty basic.
Pretty bland. It's like asking
mashed potatoes and
the best English dish possible is like blood pudding.
You know, it's like it's a rainy country, and it's all cabbages and potatoes. Those farmer food, so it's mashed potatoes and vegetables and meat. And gravy. That was
boiled meats.
But also like stews and stuff. But that's our typical Dutch food. But you know, because we're a trading nation from way back, you know.
Right.
We got in touch with all kinds of food, and you know, that's basically the same here. But you can just get all kinds of foods everywhere. So I don't know. The typical Dutch cuisine is pretty basic, but. Stroopwafels maybe. It's like a cookie with caramel.
Sounds good. Well, is there anything coming up that people should look for from you? Anything you want to plug? Any upcoming releases or anything?
Well, we had our 6th album released in the end of March, which we're touring still. So if people want to just hear what we're doing, check out The Wrong Room.
I was going to say, you've been doing the same thing pretty consistently for a while now. This same sort of dark driving drum and bass sound. I was really impressed at how well you've resisted the urge to play happy trance and please, you've sort of stuck to your guns on playing good, consistently dark drum and bass.
Yeah, but that's like...
Goes with the name, of course. You have to, I suppose.
No, it's like, that's what we love in this music, and we were never in it for the money, or we just did it because we liked it. And I think because we stuck to our guns, like, we didn't like peak real quick, but it's real consistent. And you know, like now we're one of the bigger ones within the scene that has our sound. You have Noisia and then basically us, and then you know those two are big names within this, and that's you know, I'm really happy about that, and it's good. But we do make other kinds of music, but just not as Black Sun Empire.
Right.